the mixed flower border by way of the vegetable garden and the herb garden. There's more green-fingered advice from the experts in Gardener's Diary. That's this afternoon at 5 to 2. But now at 12:30, the lunchtime news.
Good afternoon, this is ITN's Lunchtime News.
The main developments at home and abroad. Another British fishing boat finds itself in dispute with the Royal Navy. We ask, is the Navy weighing in on the wrong side? 160 passengers and crew survive as an Airbus crashes on landing during a storm in Korea.
Today's other headlines: new research on crime suggests much is committed by people addicted to drugs or alcohol. And lung cancer researchers announce a new development in treatment is their cause for real optimism.
Cornish fishermen are demanding talks with the government after a second British trawler had to return home from the Bay of Biscay. The Alice Louise headed back to port after officials from the Ministry of Agriculture warned her skipper about the size of his nets. There's increasing anger among the fishermen. They suspect the Royal Navy of watching them on behalf of the Spanish government.
The Alice Louise arrived in Newlyn Harbour, her crew furious at the loss of a week's wages. The ship was apparently boarded by inspectors from the Ministry of Agriculture and Fish and the EC, who measured the nets, declaring them to be marginally longer than the 2.5 kilometres allowed. She was then ordered home.
There was nothing wrong with my nets whatsoever. There was only two of us fishing, and it was inevitable that they were going to come there and check our nets.
What do you think about the whole thing that's gone on here?
Well, I'm a young man in the fishing industry trying to make a living, and it's got to a stage where I really don't know whether I want to carry on anymore.
Earlier this week, another boat, the Charisma, had her nets inspected. The skipper was not charged. The Alice Louise is hoping to return to the Bay of Biscay tonight. Other Cornish boats will also be leaving in the next 24 hours. The ministry has confirmed that this latest incident took place, but denies that British fishermen are being unduly harassed. The Cornish Fish Producers Association says the ministry is making a laughing stock out of itself, simply doing the Spaniards' dirty work for them. Robin White, ITN, Newlyn, Cornwall.
Well, live to Robin White now. Robin, just how angry are they, would you say?
Well, they're extremely angry. The mood down here is not only one of anger, but also of confusion. The Cornish fishermen here think that they're being used as some sort of pawns in a wider political game. They strongly believe that the Royal Navy and MAF should be out there in the Bay of Biscay looking after their interests and not simply inspecting their nets and being seen to do so. So they're very angry, they're very confused, and they can't see why they're being targeted and why the Spanish are not being more closely monitored.
And what's likely to be the next step?
Well, the fishermen's leaders here are meeting with local MPs later this morning and early this afternoon, and they'll obviously be issuing some sort of statement from that, and we'll find out if they're going to do anything positive from that. Also, various boats are expecting to leave here this afternoon and this evening. They're loading with ice at the moment, and they'll be on their way out to the Bay of Biscay later to see whatever they find when they get there.
Robin in Newlyn, thanks very much indeed. Well, we can go now to the heart of the dispute, as it were. Lt-Cmdr Andrew Edney is on the line from HMS Alderney. Lt-Cmdr Edney, after this latest incident with the Alice Louise, do you accept at least part of the accusation that you seem to be acting as watchdogs for the Spanish government?
That is an allegation that is very irritating at this end, because we have been trying our hardest to do the roles set before us. The Fishery Protection Squadron role is, first of all, to protect anyone on the high seas. That includes fishermen, whatever their circumstances. And secondly, something that we continually do around UK waters is protect the fishing stocks, and our actions on that front has been no different. We are concerned about the PR feeling back in UK, but I think I have to point out the difficulty of the problem down here. The opinion of the Spanish is really no concern of mine. We have to carry out the task that I've laid before you. But I'm dealing in an area of something around 10,000 to 20,000 square miles with just a few fishermen in it. The Spanish move around all the time, and if you can imagine, that's something the size of Era. Just two vessels here at the moment, moving between all those, meeting those two tasks can be time-consuming and not necessarily exactly in the right order.
Okay, well,
because of the distance.
Fine, well, we accept the size of the area you have to cover, but I think what Cornish fishermen may be interested in is what exactly are your instructions in terms of even-handedness?
Our first instruction is to get to any potential area of harassment and deter it, carrying out the rules of engagement that stand for any harassment on the high seas with a UK-flagged vessel.
But you see, having heard that, why then are you intervening to measure the nets of British boats?
Well, we have to do that to enforce the EC legislation, which is our secondary task, but carried out with equal importance. We're not targeting boats that the Spanish have pointed out to us. Because of the size of the area, we're boarding the vessels as we come across them. And I have to point out the latest wave of fishermen down here, and it might be worth you talking to them, are very happy with the cooperation and support we're giving them. And I get that daily. They are telling us where they are, making my job a lot easier, and I can go down and do routine inspections as we come across them. And I'm happy to say that it's all gone very well so far with the last two that we've boarded.
Lieutenant Commander Edney, thanks very much indeed. We've run out of time.
Thank you very much indeed.
The woman and her son, who spent 2 days trapped on Mont Blanc, are said to be in a remarkable condition today in spite of their terrible ordeal. Pamela Caswell and her son Simon survived virtually unscathed, but her husband Stephen was killed. They'd fallen to the bottom of a 100-foot crevasse while climbing Mont Blanc. They were flown to Chamonix, where they're now recovering in hospital. Today, Mrs. Caswell described how she and her son survived on the mountain by using her dead husband's bivouac to keep warm. They ate only dried fruit and handfuls of snow.
160 people escaped when a Korean plane crashed and burst into a fireball on landing. The passengers and crew all managed to get out before the Airbus was engulfed in flames. The plane crashed on the island of Jeju after flying from the South Korean capital, Seoul. Witnesses blamed typhoon force winds.
The main passenger compartment was completely destroyed in the crash, but astonishingly, the emergency services managed to rescue all the passengers on board. No one was critically injured, and although some were hurt, most sustained only minor injuries. After the accident, only the cockpit and the pale blue tail bearing the airline's logo could be clearly identified from the plane's mangled wreckage. Throughout the incident, live television coverage showed the plane still in flames in the field where it ended up on the edge of the airport. A stewardess said she had felt the plane shaking, then saw smoke at the back, and told passengers to prepare for an emergency landing. The plane's Canadian pilot was too shaken to speak to reporters.
That'll all come out. I'll talk to the proper authorities. It's not proper for me to speak to you.
Witnesses said the aircraft was rocked by heavy winds as it tried to land on the rain-soaked runway. Some said it touched down and was then blown off course by strong gusts and heavy rain before it eventually landed in the field. The incident occurred just as Typhoon Douglas was approaching the South Korean island. Caroline Kerr, ITN, Hong Kong.
A report today suggests that nearly half of all property crime and theft is committed by people addicted to drugs or alcohol. The study by the National Association of Probation Officers also says that 2 out of 3 prisoners take drugs or alcohol in jail. The organisation is calling for better treatment of addicts.
A break-in at a South London pub overnight, the police investigate. According to the probation officer's report, the likelihood is that it's drugs-related. The National Association of Probation Officers says that nearly half of all theft and property crime is committed to feed alcohol or drug addiction. The survey studied 5,000 offenders, 3,000 of them on probation like these men. It found that more than half were hooked on drugs or alcohol. In 7 out of 10 cases, the last offence was linked to their addiction. 23-year-old Richard Humble was addicted to cocaine and ecstasy. He said his craving for drugs drove him to violence.
Not stealing though, just being violent, just going out and beating people up and taking their money, and that's it.
Mugging them?
Well, basically, yeah, but not on the street.
I'd be planning for next day, so therefore I'd go out and commit a crime, i.e. shoplift or commercial burglary or robbery.
The report says 60% of prisoners misuse drugs or alcohol, but it says facilities to help them kick the habit are inadequate.
Well, I think it's costing the taxpayers of Britain millions every week in burglaries, insurance costs and other losses. And at the same time, the government appears to be cutting back on detoxification facilities for people with drug dependency problems.
The prison service says steps are being taken to reduce drug abuse, but these two offenders say they received no help in breaking their addiction. The report calls for an urgent government investigation into the link between drugs and crime. The Home Office says it will begin studies later this year.
Well, I'm now joined by Harry Fletcher from the National Association of Probation Officers, who you saw in that report. Harry Fletcher, how do you think addicts ought to be handled to stop them carrying on this crime spree that seems to be going on?
Well, it's an extremely complex answer. I mean, one simplistic solution would be to decriminalise drug use, but that's not on the agenda of any political party at the moment. Another solution might be to use every means that's possible to encourage people who are drug abusers to register with a doctor so that they can hopefully get treatment and help them withdraw. But again, the problem is a lot of the offenders aren't in touch with GPs, are homeless, rootless and are difficult to tie down. So it is very complex.
But this wouldn't be drugs on demand, would it?
No, I don't think so. It would be controlled by medical experts.
And everybody would have to have a prescription and it would be properly authorised and organised?
Well, I think so, because the problem is getting so chronic that something has to be done. I mean, if we were doing an interview, say, 10 years ago, I'd be saying that alcohol was the main problem in 20–30% of cases. Drugs was around, but it wasn't overwhelming, but now it is. And I think the Home Office and the Department of Health have got to act in a coordinated fashion.
It is an extraordinary figure, this one that came out in the report, that 2/3 of prisoners in jail take alcohol or drugs. That sounds as if the prison authorities have not got the situation under control at all.
No, they're not taking drugs and alcohol all the time. I mean, all the studies that have been done in prisons, including the Prison Service's own recent one on 11 jails, shows that drugs, mainly cannabis, but also the hard stuff as well, and alcohol are available in jails at some time or other. And most inmates would tell you that during their sentence they were offered drugs or they took drugs.
And the access to drugs could in fact make it more likely that when they come out they will start committing theft in order to feed that habit?
At the moment, yes. What the Prison Service are doing is cracking down on supply. They're going to increase the number of random searches. I don't think that in itself will help. There has to be proper treatment in prison as well, so that, as you say, when they come out, they don't go back to the same circumstances and commit burglaries again.
Harry Fletcher, thanks very much for joining us.
Thank you.
An international hunt has been launched for 4 former Iranian diplomats thought to be behind an explosion at a Jewish centre in Argentina. About 100 people were killed. Iran has protested to Argentina about what it calls baseless allegations. The bombing in Buenos Aires happened just a week before 2 Jewish targets were attacked in London.
A total of about 100 people are believed to have died in the explosion at the offices of the main Jewish groups in Argentina. Immediately after the bombing, in difficult conditions, rescue workers tried to recover the bodies of those who were killed. 3 weeks later, 13 people are still officially listed as missing, although they're now presumed dead. The judge leading an investigation has issued international arrest warrants for 4 former Iranian diplomats, and Israel is now urging all countries to stop supporting Iran.
You know, there are still some countries who are very lenient. So they are committing a mistake, whether unconsciously or unwillingly.
Experts believe Iran may have been responsible for the car bombs which went off in London, injuring staff at the Israeli embassy less than a week after the Argentina bombing. One says he believes there'll be more attacks on Israeli targets until the situation in Lebanon is sorted out.
As long as there is no settlement in Lebanon, because that's where Iran's allies and clients are operating, then you will have an internationalization of this war. You'll have conflicts and bombs in London, in Buenos Aires and elsewhere.
Tehran issued a statement today denying involvement in the Buenos Aires bombing. It said the allegations were baseless and discourteous.
The PLO leader Yasser Arafat and Israel's Prime Minister Yitzhak Rabin are to hold their first talks in the Middle East today. They'll meet at the border between Israel and the Palestinian-controlled Gaza Strip. Both leaders signed a historic peace agreement on the lawns of the White House last September. This morning, Israel announced the release of 8 jailed Palestinian women as a goodwill gesture.
Here, a woman city stockbroker who's taken her former employers to an industrial tribunal could get a verdict later today. Samantha Phillips says she lost her high-flying job after she rejected her boss's sexual advances. The hearing has just ended.
City broker Samantha Phillips, in the centre, says she was sacked because she fell foul of a macho office atmosphere where men bragged about scoring with women. She told the tribunal she'd got on well at brokers Willis Caroon until she went on a business trip to Denmark with her boss Giles Wilkinson. She claims he made sexual advances to her in a hotel, but she rebuffed him. Counsel for Ms. Phillips told the tribunal Mr. Wilkinson tried it on and got nowhere, but the rebuttal led to a more aggressive and unfair attitude. He strongly denies the claims. Ms. Phillips told the hearing Mr. Wilkinson called her a bimbo at a meeting and made jibes about her clothes and perfume. But the company told the tribunal she'd been sacked for lying to a client, an underwriter, although they admitted this morning shortcomings in the dismissal proceedings. Counsel for Ms. Phillips told the tribunal that even while giving evidence, the company's attitude to women showed through. He said that throughout the hearing, when referring to male members of staff, they'd used the courtesy title Mr., but when referring to Ms. Phillips, they called her Samantha. The tribunal was told by counsel for the company there was no sexual discrimination. The case has now been adjourned. Ms. Phillips is expecting to hear the result of her claim of unfair dismissal and sexual discrimination this afternoon. John Draper, ITN, Croydon.
More than 200 workers from the troubled Swan Hunter shipyard are expected to lose their jobs today. They were laid off 10 weeks ago because of the lack of work. The last shipbuilder on the Tyne is in the hands of receivers who are negotiating a rescue package with a French firm, Lt-Cmdr. It recently failed to win 2 crucial orders worth around £50 million.
Police are questioning a 26-year-old man over the death of a woman in an explosion at a house in West Yorkshire. The blast ripped through the woman's home in Todmorden, sending showers of glass into the street. 7 people needed hospital treatment. It's believed the explosion involved a petrol generator. Police are treating it as murder.
Now health news, and scientists are to begin developing a new drug which they believe could treat lung cancer. The treatments come from a £1 million deal between the Cancer Research Campaign and a pharmaceutical firm. Campaigners say they're delighted at the news.
Cancer patients at London's Royal Marsden Hospital. Advances in treatment are giving them excellent chances of survival. But the biggest cancer killer is lung cancer. It claims almost 40,000 lives a year. The new drug being developed by scientists in Slough may save some of those lives. It's a form of chemotherapy. In laboratory tests, DACA is killing cancer cells with little damage to healthy ones. Early signs show it stops cells multiplying uncontrollably. The tumour stops growing, the damaged cells die.
I think what we're looking at here is a real chance for patients who have really run out of options for a new form of therapy for them. But of course, if it works in those patients, we hope it'll work as a first-line therapy for newly diagnosed people also.
Zenova are taking over development of the drug from the Cancer Research Campaign, which will share in the profits as it passes each stage of the trials.
The key thing is that if there are opportunities to get new drugs out there, then it's our job to get them out there as fast as we can and get them to the patient as fast as we can. Now the charity just cannot do that. It's not set up to do that financially, and it's not set up to do that in all sorts of ways in relation to its resources and how it's structured.
Scientists are stressing it's too early to call this a cure. There's at least 5 years of testing ahead before it can finally be marketed. It's too late for sufferers like the entertainer Roy Castle. He was too ill to attend today's launch, but says he's delighted with the breakthrough and hopes it will help many patients in future.
Well, the Cancer Research Campaign's Director of Drug Development, Dr. David Secker, joins me now. Dr. Secker, the treatment is being used on lung cancer patients, but could it actually work for other forms of cancer as well?
Well, of course it could. I mean, lung cancer is just taken as an example of one of the many types of aggressive cancer that fails after a time to respond to traditional chemotherapy. And our hope is that DACA may well be usable in cases where the cancer has developed resistance to conventional chemotherapy.
Now, the company that's taking over the results of your research in theory, stands to make profits from what began as a charitable venture. Are you happy with that?
We're absolutely delighted with that. It's essential that academic groups that make discoveries collaborate in a partnership with a pharmaceutical company. There's no other way that the vast numbers of patients throughout the world can ever benefit from these developments. And this is a very exciting story of a partnership between a chemistry laboratory in the University of Auckland in New Zealand, the Cancer Research Campaign's drug development program, and a young biotechnology company, Zenova, in Slough, all brought together through the good offices of the Cancer Research Campaign Technology Limited. So it's a very exciting international collaboration that is promising to bring this drug through its clinical trials.
Obviously, it's going to raise a lot of hopes. When is it going to be available widely?
Well, that depends. It's early days. The first clinical trials really are to assess the safety, the side effects, and the best way of administering the drug. And it's going to take a few years before those trials are complete. And really the earliest it could be on the market, if those trials go well, would be by the end of the century, by 1999.
Dr. Secker, thanks very much indeed for joining us.
The newest member of the royal family has made his first public appearance within the past few minutes. Columbus Taylor and his mother, Lady Helen, left the Portland Hospital in central London to the cheers of onlookers. Proud Father Tim came to take his wife and child home to Knightsbridge, and they posed for the cameras. Columbus was born on Saturday evening, a month prematurely, weighing 6 pounds 9 ounces. The parents were all smiles, but they refused to answer questions about how they'd chosen their son's name.
In the city, shares were depressed by minutes of the monthly meeting between the Chancellor and the Governor of the Bank of England, which showed that the Governor wanted a rate rise sooner rather than later. A short time ago, the FT100 index was down more than 14 points. The pound was down a touch against the dollar. It was down a pfennig against the German mark.
And the day's top story once again. Cornish fishermen are demanding talks with the government after a second British trawler had to return home from the Bay of Biscay. On this programme, an officer from one of the fishery protection vessels in the Bay of Biscay denied that the Royal Navy were harassing British boats.
And that's all from the Lunchtime News today.
We're back tomorrow. Till then, goodbye.
Goodbye.
Hello, good afternoon. Apart from a few spots of drizzle on the east coast, Scotland, Northern Ireland and Northern England mostly dry again today with a little bit of sunshine. But further south it's a much more unsettled story. Some heavy bursts of rain moved up from the south overnight, and it's going to take a time before they gradually move off to the south and east again tomorrow. We're keeping track of them using the Met Office weather radar. In the early hours of this morning there were some very heavy bursts of rain around, mostly down in the south and west there, over an inch of rain for some. And this band of rain has been moving very slowly northwards during the night and through this morning. It's going to go a little further north into North Wales and perhaps up into parts of Lincolnshire, and then eventually tomorrow move away to the south and east again. So the north should stay dry right the way through. So for the rest of this afternoon then, a lot of cloud around in the north, and on the east coast it's thick enough to produce a few spots of drizzle. But the further west you are, the brighter it becomes, just a little bit of sunshine from time to time. In the south though, further bursts of rain to come this afternoon, still the chance of a rumble of thunder, odd brighter spells tucking into the southeast, but windy for many of us today, and that's keeping temperatures down to around 18 for most. That's only 64 Fahrenheit. Here's a summary.
Sponsored by PowerGen, a partner in Kinetica Natural.